Hola, bienvenidos a todos. Estoy Eric Vilain. Ah, Gracias por escuchar esta sesión sobre inclusión y diversidad en el movimiento olímpico. Am, ah, Planteando la pregunta sobre la equidad en los deportes. Am, es un juego am, ah, justo. Ojalá estuviera en Perú con todos ustedes. Aunque he aprendido mucho español, todavía soy un estudiante del idioma, del lenguaje, y voy a pasarme al inglés para hablar sobre este tema mucho complejo. Um, so I'm going to talk about what constitutes fair game. I've been involved in this um, theme for a very long time. I'm a geneticist with a lot of interest in sports, and uh, I'm at the University of California, Irvine, and I started being involved um, um, right after Castor Semenya, that I'm sure many of you know or have heard about, right after she won decisively in 2009 the World Championship in Berlin for 800 meters. And shortly after, there was a lot of media attacks against her, claiming that she won unfairly. And I got not only interested, but the International Olympic Committee asked me to participate to a reflection and then many consensus meetings as a specialist of conditions known as intersex or differences of sex development. You can see in this particular um, particular display, this particular article, that Castor is represented with all the stereotypes of masculinity. She's flexing her arms, her hair is short, and that's the image that the newspaper wants to project, as the article was quite negative about her, as if sort of implying that she did win, but unfairly. Um, Now you can see that depending on which side you're on, in a sense, the message can be completely different. Where here it's the exact opposite, trying to make a point that Castor has all the attributes of femininity and all the stereotypes of it. She is wearing a dress. Her lips are painted. Her hair is longer, and she's wearing jewelry. So it's really a matter of perception and whether athletes, women athletes, cross a somewhat invisible threshold of what a woman should look like in the eyes of sports authorities. Um, what's really interesting about Castor is that she's far from being the the number one world champion, the number one world record for 800 meters. She's number four, not bad. But interestingly, a year before, Pamela Gelimo was number three. And her win did not produce any kind of the media frenzy that we've heard of with Caster Semenya. Finally, the world record of all times, probably the longest world record existing in all athletics, held since 1983, belongs to Jarmila Kratochvilova. And although there has been numerous attempts of discrediting and removing this world record based on accusations of doping, this never actually happened. So here we are with three women with very different stories and very different outcomes and um, different narratives about them, and I find this really really interesting. Now, sports is a very important part of our lives. It embodies many human values, um, particularly values of teamwork, values of leadership, values of competitiveness, but also it embodies the values of nationalism. As you know, every country is very proud of their athletes. Um, now, what we're talking about today is a debate um, over sex testing, and basically who should belong to one category, male or female, um, and how this actually is decided. And overall, there are what I there are two main camps, if you could define the various opinions about sex testing. On one camp, you have what could be called the anatomist. They're usually sports officials, and there are also some scientists there. They believe that the sex division in sports should be based on a biological feature, even if it's imperfect. Now, on the other side, a completely different side, that is what could be called the identifiers, um, who believe that sex segregation should be based only on self-identification. And people who think that are often outsiders, so not sports officials, scholars, gender scholars, feminist scholars, activists, some athletes themselves. Um, and these athletes, these identifiers argue that the fact that the biology is so messy is a reason enough to do away with biology. Um, the sex verification in athletics has been going on for a very long time. And since the mid 60s, between the mid 60s and I would say the 90s, it's been all about biology. In the 60s, there were physical inspection at some competition, rapidly discredited and considered really too invasive of privacy, having been dubbed nude parades. Shortly after, there was a biological marker that was the sex chromatin test introduced at the Olympic Games, looking at what's called bar bodies, which is sex chromatin, and that is an indirect way to look at the presence of uh, two X chromosomes versus one X chromosomes. If there are two X chromosomes, the assumption is that this is a 46XX karyotype, and therefore a female sex bichromosome. And if there is only one X chromosome, the assumption is that the athlete is XY, and therefore a biological male by chromosomes. Now, what's happened in the mid 80s was the case of Doctora Maria Patino, who is in the audience and listening. And this is Maria. We've become very good friends. And this is the kind of certificate that all athletes, all women athletes, had to carry, basically showing that they were they had undergone a biological test that was a sex chromatin test that was uh, able to basically qualify them for the female category. And as you can see, Dr. Apatino had the certificate, but then as it happened, in 1985, it was determined that this certificate was not valid, and Dr. Patino was forced by the sports authorities to not compete in the women category. She eventually was reinstated after a very, very long fight. Unlike other athletes who just accepted their fate, Dr. Patino has really become a symbol of resistance against rules enacted by sports authorities. And she's been very helpful in making me understand all the complexity of sports role and categorization in sports. In 1992, another biological test, but not the sex chromatin, but now a genetic test measuring the presence or the absence of a gene called SRY that's placed on the Y chromosome, was introduced. But fundamentally, it was similar to the sex chromatin test. It was just more precise and less subject to errors. It took until the late 90s for which no more systematic sex verification at Olympic events was enacted. Then in the year 2000, now biology was less an issue, and then there was a lot of things about society. There was a Stockholm consensus meeting on trans athletes in 2003, new eligibility rules on hyperandrogenism, which is high levels of androgens, the male hormones such as testosterone, that was eventually suspended in 2016. Another consensus meeting on eligibility rules on sex reassignment for trans athletes in 2015. New IAAF, now World Athletics rules on female classification in 2017. And a challenge of these rules by Caster in the Court of Arbitrations of Sports. She loses her CAS appeal in 2019. And in 2021, the IOC produces a framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination that we will talk about. Recently, last year in 2023, there was a transgender ban from both World Athletics and FINA, now known as World Aquatics. There's been a lot of writings about this and about the role of science in shaping gender-based policies in athletics. Dr. Patino and I have written this paper in 2019 in Lancet. I encourage you to read it. It touches on a lot of things that I'm talking about today. This is Caster and the news that she loses her fight. So I'm gonna talk about a few concepts here. First of all, a question that's often asked is, do variants for sex and gender, do they provide an advantage in athletics? And the response is probably they do, but the real question is this advantage higher than other natural advantages in sports? So we know when you compare sexes in athletics that men are doing better than women. There is that's particularly true for athletics. You see the highest differences in long jump, but it's true for many, if not all, of the athletics disciplines here. Now, that's not necessarily true for absolutely all athletics events. For what's called ultra marathon, very, very long marathons, here 268 mile, which is not an Olympic category, then women actually can do in some of those very peculiar events. They can catch up to men, but this is an exception. A lot of the rules from sports authorities come with this first of all, this assumption that testosterone is the main factor influencing sports, and come with this basically this fact that range of testosterone for males is completely different with the range present in female. You can see huge differences. Female normal range is less than 2.7 nanomole per liters, and male between 10 and 35. Now, there are different ways of measuring testosterone. I'm not going to go into the details. So the range is depending on the method of measurement, if it's liquid chromatography, mass spectrometry, or LC-MS. As you can see, the ranges are slightly different. Now, we know that androgenic hormones in sports do increase muscle strength, and that's why it's forbidden, because it's considered doping. However, overproduction of male hormones or androgens by the body is presently accepted in both men and women to a degree, and this degree has gone down and down, but until recently, there was an acceptance by the sports authorities that androgen levels higher than, above the normal female range would be accepted within limits. I'll come to that. Now, some differences of sex development, or DSD, may cause some overproduction of testosterone, and that could be considered as giving an unfair advantage. And you can see here, some cases of DSD could be in the middle. Some of them will have testosterone level in the male range. So there is no question that there could be some advantage, but is it unfair? That's the real question. Does it provide an advantage that is so disproportionate, so overwhelming, that it makes athletes win everything? And the answer is it's complicated, but I can show you several examples of apparent unfairness in sports. There is geographical unfairness. So, for example, you have here a comparison between Norway and Singapore, about the same number of inhabitants, about 5 million citizens, about the same socioeconomic status for the country. And Norway has won at the last Winter Olympics 37 medals, including 16 golds, whereas Singapore has about 5 million people, just like Ecuador, has never won any Winter Olympic medals. Here is another interesting example. Jyromant Tirenta from Finland, winning in 1964 gold for the 15 and for the 30 kilometers in cross-country ski, but he was affected with a disease called familial erythrocytosis. Basically, it was internally the equivalent of having massive amount of erythropoietin, or EPO, which is a banned substance, but he was producing it naturally, and that increased tremendously his number of red blood cells, therefore more transport of oxygen, therefore more energy delivered to the muscle. Now, this is a very dangerous condition. You can get strokes and all sorts of embolism, but it was, in a sense, a main reason why he was so good at it. Flo Hyman, famous American volleyball, had Marfan syndrome, making her her body very fit for this particular volleyball sport. And this is also a dangerous condition, so dangerous that she actually died courtside because of an aortic aneurysm caused by the Marfan syndrome. There are many genetics reasons to be excellent at sports. For example, one of the most famous example is ACTN3 genotype. Many of us carry a genetic variant called a polymorphism in ACTN3. ACTN3 is a protein part of the muscle. It's called actinin, and many of us carry this variant called R577X. Basically, it creates a smaller truncated actinin, or ACTN3. Many of us carry this X allele, and we're deficient in alpha-actinin 3 protein, and therefore we have lower fast-twitch fiber percentage. But we don't have a disease, it's just a variation. Now, you can see that there are geographic and race differences. 25% of Asian populations carry the XX genotype, but only 1% of Kenyans and Nigerians. But what's really interesting is only 3% of elite sprinters carry the X allele. In order to be a successful elite sprinter, it's very, very difficult to carry this X allele, and it is a disadvantage. So those who do not carry it are at an advantage. So I'll cut to recent rules by World Athletics. In 2018, World Athletics talked about installing regulations for relevant female athletes with differences of sex development that were limited to restricted events, 400 meters to the mile, and for athletes that had to be, in order to be concerned by those rules, they had to carry a Y chromosome. And if the ask was that the athlete had to lower her level of testosterone below 5 nanomoles for at least 6 months. You know, there are many details about this rule. I'm not going to go into this, but the main point is that it targeted only athletes, women athletes carrying a Y chromosome. This rule was based on mainly 2 papers and only one, that's the one below here, in British Journal of Sports Medicine by doctors Bermond and Garnier, that showed that there was some correlation between levels of testosterone and performance in women. But it was shown that it was true only for and I'll pass at the sorry, in the interest of time, I'm going to go a little faster. They showed that it was correlated, the performance was correlated with testosterone only in 400 meters hurdles, 800 meters, hammer throw, and pole vault. Now, what's interesting is the rules that came out of that did include 400 meters hurdles, and 800 meters, did not include hammer throw, did not include pole vault, but the federations added 1,500 meter race and 1 mile race. So this was in disregard to the one paper that actually provided a little bit of scientific evidence that there was a correlation. Why is that? Because presumably there was no women athletes with a Y chromosome in hammer throw and pole vault, but there was in 1,500 meters and 1 mile. So in other words, the federation already knew who they wanted to disqualify from the female category, and they looked at some science and tried to fit it in, and when it didn't fit, they still came up with the rules. I'm going to come back a little bit here and talk about one thing that's really interesting to me, which is that this level of 5 nanomoles per liter for testosterone as a threshold, applying only to XY women and not XX women, has been very interesting to me, because in fact, there are many women with a condition, and these women are XX, they're not XY, with a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. And there are a number of women who have PCOS and have testosterone above 5 nanomoles. Not many, but in the world of sports, they can be overrepresented. So what's interesting is women who are XX with a level of testosterone above 5 nanomoles may compete in the female category, but women who are XY with a testosterone above 5 nanomoles cannot. And there is no good scientific explanation for this. In 2021, the IOC came up with what's called a framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sex variation. And I want to point out to you a few things. There is, first of all, a presumption of inclusion. It says that everyone, regardless of their gender identity, expression, and or sex variations, should be able to participate in sport safely and without prejudice. And there also should be no presumption of advantage. So at the base, even if someone has any kind of sex or gender variant, they should not be automatically presumed that they have an advantage. However, if a federation decides to exclude athletes with gender and sex variations from competitions, they need to come up with an evidence-based approach. And any restriction arising from eligibility criteria should be based on robust and peer-reviewed research that needs to demonstrate a consistent, unfair, and disproportionate competitive advantage in performance. They should do this evidence-based approach based on a group that is consistent in gender and athletic engagement with the group that's being excluded, meaning that all the science behind exclusion needs to compare women with women, XY women with XX women, for example, not women with men. And also, it needs to compare athletes to athletes. One cannot just exclude women athletes based on data that are coming from non-athletes. And you need to demonstrate that there is such a disproportionate competitive advantage. Now, what's interesting is the way federations have interpreted these IOC framework on inclusion. I'll give you 3 examples. World Aquatics, or FINA, has restricted transgender women from competing at elite level. Basically, no trans women are allowed, regardless of testosterone level. World Athletics also says no trans women are allowed, but they actually allow women with a difference of sex development or intersex if their testosterone is less now, not 5, but it's gone down to 2.5 nanomoles per liter, again, with no good evidence of why there was a shift from 5 to 2.5. Now, hockey, interestingly, allows trans women, if they've lived as trans women for 2 years, and there is no testosterone level requirement. So very different interpretations of this framework. And this framework, unfortunately, does not have much teeth. There is no consequences if you don't follow the framework. The IOC just suggests this framework of inclusion, but there is no sanctions to federations if they don't follow it or don't follow the methods that are prone to be deemed important if you want to exclude a category. Now, what's really interesting is, there is really an increasing number of people in many countries who do not consider themselves in one of the binary sex categories. They consider themselves non-binary, for example, neither male or female. There are even many countries that allow an X mark on their passport rather than male M or female F. And LGBT and intersex rights are becoming the social norm in more and more countries. So, it's interesting to see or debate how long can sports have distinct criteria for inclusion, such as male and female, and what to do when a non-binary athlete at the level of the Olympics would come with a passport with an X, neither M or F. So this is an ongoing debate. So these are really recent events where World Athletics excludes transgender women from female athletes, as I mentioned, with the only sort of allowance is for women with a DSD or intersex situation where the level of testosterone is now quite low at 2.5. And now the other thing that has happened is that it's not just for some events, it's applied to all events. So not just 400 meters to the mile, it's everything, and for which there is absolutely no evidence that these other events, say, I don't know, shot put or any other or marathon, that it's based on any science. So yeah, now it's all events. So there's been a lot of debates about this, and this was an article in Science where the journalist is asking me, is there a scientific consensus about how trans athletes actually perform compared with cisgender women? And I say no. There is you have to demonstrate with athletes that systematically trans and athletes with the DSD actually perform in real life with a disproportionate advantage. So I will stop here because we're at time, and I'd like to finish with this question for the audience. And I know I'm not live, but the question is, what's the fastest time for a marathon? And here are two choices, and most people, of course, will choose A because we all are interested in marathon, and we know what's going on, and it's never been we think it's never been less than 2 hours, except so that's true. That's Eliud Kipchoge from Kenya has this fastest time for a marathon, but the other alternative, the other choice is also true, as you can see with Daniel Romanchuk from the United States in 2020, with a record that's much, much below 2 hours. So I'll leave that for you as food for thought. And I will thank you all. And you can see here a picture of myself with Dr. Maria Jose Martinez Patino in front of the International Olympic building in Lausanne as we were going to participate in one of their consensus meetings. Thank you very much for your attention.